So meanwhile, we need to proceed with the class here. We've been talking about, we just finished talking about Revelation chapter 13, the most controversial scripture chapter in the whole Bible, I think, about the beast and the mark of the beast and the 144,000 that escaped the mark. This involves the disciple and the people that are with any particular initiate, and we've been the chapters that which follows kind of itemizes what happens, what he has to overcome, and now we get to chapter 15, and chapter 15 tells us of seven labors, so to speak, or seven things that the disciple needs to overcome. He and the people that are with him need to overcome to obtain liberation before, in other words, before their work is done. There's seven important things that must transpire. Okay, so we move to Revelation chapter 15:1, and I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. Now, the common interpretation of this is, in the last days is going to be these 7 angels that are going to pour out these terrible plagues among humanity. But the esoteric interpretation is a little bit different. These are 7, they're called plagues, but they're 7 works that the disciple performs that others people see as a plague because they fight against it. Because when an innovator comes forth, you can pick anybody in history that's really been in service of humanity. That person is attacked, and he attacks the status quo. And those that support the status quo see the person as a plague among what they are trying to keep as the in control. So they're losing their control, and when those in power feel that they're losing control, they will feel like just as if a plague has struck them. And this is the message of the 7 angels with the 7 plagues. The 7 plagues are going to strongly attack those who are holding on to power and those that are holding on to a false sense of authority. Okay, so we have the 7 angels with the 7 plagues. And this sign was given in heaven. Heaven is symbolic, a higher consciousness. So in the disciple himself resides heaven, and heaven within him is his connection to the Christ self. So in this sign is given to the disciple through his higher consciousness. So he sees these 7 angels with the 7 plagues, and these because the sign is given in heaven, it signifies that the disciple has mastered all the lower energies which govern his body and his life. So he's achieved a degree of mastery, and thus the sign is given in heaven about these particular plagues. It says, in them is filled up the wrath of God. The word wrath comes from the Greek word thumos, which literally means heated passion. And it often talks about wrath in the book of Revelations here. And more literally, it's talking about the strong passion in connection with the disciple. Once the disciple gets clear the message of his work to do, He feels very passionate about it to the extent that nothing can interfere with his will to complete the mission. And speaking of passion on a regular level, we saw that with Christ when he cleansed the temple. And when he was chasing those guys out of the temple with a whip, he, he, uh, he said these words, "The zeal of thine house hath eaten me up." In other words, he felt very passionate about these guys turning the temple into what he called a den of thieves. Felt very passionate about doing something about that. And this happens to the disciple. He has a passion, maybe not a passion like Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins, for instance, that type of person has a passion that is really on display. But with a disciple, it's more of a quiet passion. He may not rant and rave and stomp about and really get a lot of attention to himself, but he'll have an inner fire that drives him forward no matter what happens.
Tony Robbins, his zeal is more, I think, emotionally polarized.
Yeah, that's a solar plexus type. Solar plexus passion is really obvious to people when people are on fire with the lower passions. They, they can't keep it to themselves. The disciple can feel very passionate, yet not demonstrate it, so it becomes obvious to everybody around him. Okay, and then I saw as if it were a sea of glass mingled with fire, and them that had gotten victory over the beast and over his image and over his mark and over his name. They stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. Okay, what in the world is the sea of glass symbolic of? Okay, what is the sea symbolic of? I bet somebody knows that. Sea, water, what's it symbolic of?
Emotions.
Emotion, right. So the water is symbolic of emotion, and the sea is symbolic of deep emotion. But a sea of glass, how is a sea of glass different from a regular sea? Let's examine that. First of all, if you're standing on a regular sea and look into it, what do you see? You can't even see any fish down there, can you? You can't see anything. It's maybe a nice color and everything, but you can't see in it. But if it were a sea of glass, you could look down and see everything going on in the entire ocean. If the ocean were a sea of glass. Also, what's different from a regular sea is they were standing on the sea of glass. What's the symbolism of standing on the sea of glass?
Dominion over your emotions.
Exactly. Dominion over emotions. The disciple has control over his emotions, and he can look into the emotional body and see clearly how the emotions work and how they operate and how they can be used. Now, the person on the regular sea, that is immersed in regular emotion, they control him and he doesn't understand why he's motivated to do what he's doing. He thinks maybe he's making a mental decision, but oftentimes with 90% of the people out there, their decisions are motivated by their emotions, and a lot of people can't even explain why they're doing what they're doing or why they believe what they believe, because they're going by what they feel. So they're like, if they stand on a sea, they will sink. They will sink down into the emotions and be controlled by them, and they won't be able to see the bottom. They won't even be able to see the fish accurately. But on the sea of glass, they look down into the emotional level and they can understand it. They understand how, with regular solar plexus emotion, everything is reversed so that people do not see correctly through their emotional body. But when you stand upon the sea of glass, you can look down and you can, by using the mind, having the mind control the emotions, the mind can look into the feeling nature and understand it and put it to constructive use.
So
Hey,
you can,
JJ.
so if you're a master, you can use your emotions whenever you need to.
Right,
So,
like Jesus did. And the
right.
great part about when he cleansed the temple is it wasn't really an impulsive thing. He saw what was going on in the temple, and what did he do when he made the decision?
Made a whip.
Yeah. In other words, if he was impulsive, he just would have went in there and tried to overturn everything. But he wasn't impulsive. He looked at the situation, surveyed it, and asked himself, well, what do I need to really make this cleansing work? I need a whip. So he went out and instead of just impulsively reacting the way we do, like if the average guy gets insulted, he insulted his mother or something, he'll maybe take a swing at you with an impulse, without even thinking about it. But when Jesus had the decision, made the decision to cleanse the temple, he just didn't burst in there and go crazy. No, he thought, well, here's what I got to figure out how to do to make this a success. And so he went out and he actually made him a whip, it says. So he had to spend a couple hours probably making him that whip. He had plenty of time to think about it as he was making that whip, whether he was going to go through with it or not. So it wasn't an impulsive thing. It was a decision he made, and then he followed through with that decision. Whereas the person with the emotions in control, he just operates on impulse and doesn't think about it, and then he regrets it later, half the time. Yeah.
Hey,
I got
JJ.
a, I got a, oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
Ray.
Lorraine.
So when I think about a sea of glass, I think the difference for me, anyways, is that there's no movement. When the real waters move, they're constantly in motion, but a sea of glass is standing still. So the emotions themselves are quietened. They are not out of control or raging, but the emotions are calm. They're
That's,
still.
that's a real good point, Lorraine. In other words, the person in charge of his emotions is a person in a state of peace. Okay. So even though you use your emotions, you're on the sea of glass and the sea is still there. It your emotional body does not disturb your peace because you can stand on it and see it. And so, yeah, that's a really big difference between the disciple who's in charge of his emotions and one who isn't, is he can be in a state of peace. It doesn't mean he doesn't feel emotion. He can feel powerful emotion. I mean, there's still a big sea there that he's standing upon, but he's at peace, and that's why Jesus was able to stand on the bow of the ship and during the storm and says, "Peace, be still," and the storm subsided because he was at peace. And you got to admit, if you were in the middle of a storm and it looked like your ship was going to sink, it would be really hard to be at peace and in that situation. But
Well, that's the thing about when you achieve soul contact, you're in a constant state of peace, even if you're in the middle of a hurricane.
yeah, yeah.
Now, I got a question. How does this relate to Paul saying, I see through a glass darkly, and I will be seen as I will see as I am seen? Does this
Well,
relate
the
to that?
glass he's talking about wasn't associated with water or the sea. It was more like a mirror. Or a window he was looking through. And when we look, say, you look through a glass that is stained or whatever, you may not see through clearly. But he was talking about the disciple the time will come when we will be able to see clearly why things are the way they are, you know. But as we go through life, there's many times we approach situations that we are not sure exactly what to do or what is
We see
true
through
or
a
what is
glass
false.
darkly.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we need to learn to, the promise is that, you know, the disciple as he forges forward will eventually be able to see clearly. And,
Right.
but not always at the beginning. And I'm sure we can all identify with that. And matter of fact, everybody here, I'm sure, has certain questions that are yet unanswered in their minds, where you're not seeing through a glass clearly yet. But the promise is continue, and eventually everything will become clear. You know. Okay, now these people that stand on the sea of glass have obtained victory over the beast, over his image, over his mark, and over the number of his name. Now, this is proof that the beast and the number are more symbolic than literal, because, for instance, over the number of his name, if the 666 were a literal number that's tattooed on somebody's head or something like that, or even on a barcode, or, you know, there's all kinds of ideas of a literal 666 showing up somewhere. If that were the case, how do you obtain victory over that? How do you obtain victory over a shopping receipt? How do you obtain victory over a number on somebody's forehead or a number tattooed on your right hand or whatever they think? It doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you look at it the way we have been interpreting it, the correspondence works. And this is what you want to look at in any interpretation. Do all the correspondences work? And in the esoteric interpretation, all the correspondences really fall in place. Okay, the victory over the beast and his image represent, the beast, of course, represents unearned authority, authority that takes the place of God. Okay, so that can be a book, a prophet, priest, king, political leader, scientific expert, a doctor, that takes the place of the voice within you. And then the voice of God comes within. So when it comes down to it, most people will go with what the outward authorities say over any voice that comes within. Matter of fact, a lot of people don't believe there's any voice within at all. They think that's just imagination. But those that get a victory over the beast merely have more faith in the inner Christ, the inner God within you that you listen to, because that's where God is within you, rather than the voices outside. And this one thing that Joshua apparently has come to recognize, he's starting to follow his inner voice above all the outer voices that's telling him what's right and wrong. And so now over his image, the image of the beast is projected in a lot of ways. The different idols that's out there that we give more heed to than the voice within. And the Bible itself can be an image of the beast in the fact that, well, it can be interpreted hundreds of different ways, and people have killed and went to war because of what is said in the Bible, because they misinterpret it. So even though the Bible is a great book, it has to be read and interpreted in harmony with the inner voice. So if without the inner voice, even the Bible or the scriptures or Shakespeare or anything can be represent an image of the beast. So to overcome the image of the beast, you first of all give highest priority to the voice within and let it be stimulated by these things from without, but not controlled. And over the mark is in the right hand symbolizes labor, and in the forehead symbolizes thought. So if your thought is, you take your thought and your labor away from the control of the outer authorities, then you have victory over the mark. And then over the number of his name, the 666, 6 is the number of the solar plexus. The solar plexus governs the emotions. And the 666 recognizes that the emotions control the feeling nature, of course, the your actions, and your mind. Those three things, the 3 6s. So the disciple has control over his actions, over his feelings, and over his thoughts. So they are not controlled by outer authorities that claim or seem to take the place of your inner voice. So that the whole beast thing is an attempt to take away your control from your inner self, your true self, and place it with outer authorities. Got into him, or the fear of death, so much that they will go with what the outward authority says about the inner, especially if it looks like their life is on the line. And I've seen this happen a number of times with people. We had one member of our original group that was really well liked and quite advanced spiritually, and she got cancer, and I she just went 100% with whatever the doctor said, because when your life is at stake, that's when that's when you really have a big test about whether you'll go with the outward or inner authority. Okay, any comment on that? Have you ever, how about you guys? Have you, anybody here had a big test in their life about outward authorities trying to control them, and it was difficult to make a decision?
I have in the health realm. To make a long story short, I got sick with a thyroid problem, and I didn't want to do what the doctor said immediately. I had a feeling inside that something was wrong, and I kept following that feeling. And I was resisting what the doctors were telling me to do because they just wanted me to take the thyroid medication. But I just, for some reason, within, I felt I needed to continue to find what was really the problem. And I found out after a while, and after a lot of pressure from family and the doctor, that through my own investigation, I found the true problem, which is I have a genetic iron disease that would have killed me had I not found it. And so as soon as I found that I had that, then that feeling within me went away, like, oh yes, you found the reason that you needed to continue searching. So yes, I've had that specifically with a health issue. I had to listen to the voice within.
Yeah, and doctors are ordinary people and are just like you and me, and they're not perfect by any means. And they do have certain protocols that they're taught in, and they have very little education in nutrition. So if nutrition is a solution to a physical problem, for instance, you need to go beyond the outward authorities, do some research on your own. But certain things doctors are great earned authorities on. If you have a broken bone or get into an accident, you certainly need their expertise in that. But yes, and there's an interesting little piece of knowledge here. they had a doctor's strike in Israel a number of years ago. And during the strike, the death rate went down 25%. So I found that kind of curious, interesting.
I had a lot of opposition on COVID because I just didn't feel like taking a shot, getting vaccinated, and there was some inner voice said, "Don't do it, don't do it." And so I stood by that. And man, I was in a store one time without a mask on. This guy threw a loaf of bread at me. I
Yeah,
got off
That was
because I
Curtis, and it
didn't have a mask on.
wasn't
It was
because he didn't.
optional.
yeah.
The mask
That
was
was
If you're now, for some people, maybe getting vaccinated won't hurt them at all, but for others, it may be deadly. So if your inner voice tells you not to, well, then follow it, no matter what the outer voices say. Yeah.
I just caught the loaf of bread and tossed it back to him.
Well,
That
same
was
thing
it.
with a lot of things. So they say one man's cure is another man's poison. And there's a lot of truth to that. There's a lot of people that are allergic to. I have a couple nieces or grandkids that's allergic to peanut butter, and I can eat peanut butter all day long and it doesn't hurt me. But
I remember you used to make me peanut butter and syrup and butter toast when I was a
yeah,
kid.
yeah,
You remember that?
yeah, wasn't very healthy, but it was good at the time.
Sure was good. That's why we'll live to be 100.
Okay, the sea of glass is mingled with fire. Got any idea what that would mean? It's interesting, all the symbology here.
It's mingled with what?
Fire.
Oh, fire. Well,
Yeah.
fire is purification. Higher mind, you might go up to your higher mind to use your emotions.
Yeah, have you heard the scripture? My God is a consuming fire.
Yeah.
So, or the fiery will of God. So the disciple tunes into the presence of God, the fire that burns within him, and that fire uh, gives dominance over the lower emotions. So he's able to stand on the sea of glass uh, that is mingled with fire. Okay. Next we read, and they sung the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and marvelous are thy works, Lord God Almighty. Just and true are thy ways, King of saints. Who shall fear thee, O Lord, and glorify thy name? For thou art holy, and all nations shall come and worship before thee, for thy judgments are made manifest. So the people that have dominance over the emotions and over the lower nature, they sing the song of Moses. Now, the song of Moses was sang after they crossed through the Red Sea, and they wandered in the desert for 40 years, and they built this tabernacle. And in the tabernacle, they had the Ark of the Covenant. And what's interesting about the Ark of the Covenant there was that after the temple was built, apparently they didn't have the Ark of the Covenant anymore, and the rebuilt temple in the days of Jesus, all they had was empty space where the Ark of the Covenant was supposed to be. Yet they had the Ark of the Covenant in the wilderness as they were roaming around, symbolic of the idea that you don't need a beautiful temple, a beautiful building to find the Ark of the Covenant where all the laws of God are inscribed. And all the laws of God are inscribed in the heart, in the inner core of your being, where the Christ consciousness is. That's where you find the true ark. And you can find that in just a roving tabernacle in the wilderness. And you don't, and if you search for it in a beautiful finished temple like existed in the days of Jesus, there's just an empty space and no ark.
White sepulchres.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, didn't the Ark of the Covenant end up below the Temple of Solomon? It was supposed to have
Well,
been
that's
buried.
legend says that, and there's some people in Ethiopia today that claim to have the ark and won't let anybody near it. So then there's a half a dozen others. So the people in Ethiopia, an Ethiopian church, um, seems to have the strongest claim for having the ark.
Well, we need to be the raiders.
Yeah, right.
We'll get that ark.
Okay, they sing the Song of Moses, which was a victory song of passing through. Again, water is involved. The Red Sea was divided. Again, control over the emotions. So they were able to pass through the Red Sea, powerful emotions to the right, to the left, everywhere they look, but the emotions are under control again. And then there's a second song, the Song of the Lamb. And the Song of the Lamb, of course, is symbolic of Christ. And then it talks here about they have harps and they sing, and that's all symbolic of harmony. So if you're in harmony, you can sing the Song of the Lamb, which is, by singing the Song of the Lamb, is symbolic of your voice being in harmony and speaking the words of the inner Christ. So when you put yourself in harmony with the inner Christ, and you speak and you teach and you let things out, they will be in harmony with what is called the Song of the Lamb here. Okay, any comments on that? The next one is about the opening of the ark, and this is where we'll go next week. And I looked, and I behold, the temple of the tabernacle, the testimony in heaven was opened. Okay, any comments or questions before we move on?
I just think it's interesting how we see through a glass darkly in the beginning, and it gets more and more clear as we move along until it becomes transparent.
Yeah, and it really doesn't happen with a snap of a finger. It's a process that you get a little bit of light here and a little bit of light there until it amounts to a grand revelation at the end of your journey. Okay, real good, my friends.
Yeah, I got a question then. So the story of Jesus walking on the water and then, calling forth Peter, and Peter takes a few steps and then falls or sinks. Is it representative of faith in that one, or is that also to do with the emotions and being above the emotional waters?
Yeah, a lot of people question if the miracles were really real, but real or not, they also have a lot of symbology in them. So we assume he did actually walk on the water, but for him to be able to walk on the water, he had to be in total control of his lower nature. And walking on water is symbolic of being in control of your lower emotions. Now, Peter was a quite impulsive person, and when he says, "Lord, can I join you?" And he says, "Sure, come on." So he goes out, and he wasn't even thinking anything negative about emotions. And then all of a sudden, he began to think, "Wait, is this something that I can do or not?" And then he started to sink because he was the scriptures portray him as kind of an impulsive fellow. But so it's pretty even that the symbology is very much of a teaching thing. And you can look at all the miracles, and there's symbolism in all the miracles, whether the miracles are literal or not, there's teaching involved. And same thing with your life. You look at significant events in your life, and there's symbolism in those events. And like Tyler was just telling us about medical problems he had, and there's, if he looks at all these things, he can find symbolism that can teach him things from the physical challenges that he has had in his life. Okay, any more comment?
Just this one scripture that's kind of relevant to what we talked about at the beginning, where we experience everything. There's a scripture that says, all things come alike to all, which I contemplate quite often and realize that, yeah, we've all been angels and demons and men and women, and we've experienced everything imaginable that one person can experience.
Yeah. When you really get to know somebody, you really find out that, you know, there's a lot more in common with people once you get to know them than there isn't. And you know, the Republicans and Democrats need to learn that principle and get along with each other and share a little bit more